Okay, welcome to Crow's Corner this week. We have some exciting information and an exciting guest speaker today. We have pro video game analyst Tenkiei here. I'm going to mangle his name Tenkiei, which is supposed to be Tenkiei or Tenkiei, or depending on how you pronounce it. You can ask him about that, and he just prefers 10 for all the issues. So I'm just gonna call him 10. I like Tenkiei because my aunt was a pro bookkeeper, and Tenkiei is what I go with. So anyway, he's gonna go over some exciting information on how many of you guys go to meta builds and you go to a meta build and you just feel like, hey, I've just got to follow this meta build. I don't understand exactly how to make all the skills and all the items and all of everything work together just 100% perfectly. Can you hit me up in chat? I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I don't understand exactly how all those things work together all the time perfectly. And I end up throwing spaghetti at the wall, so to speak.
I feel like that's a bad analogy because, like, wet spaghetti could stick easily.
Nah. Well, regardless, things do not work out right.
Yeah. And they wonder, why those exactly, Ian. They wonder why those things don't get the same result, even though they're trying to copy it exactly. We're going to go over some synergies and some things like that. I do have some information on yoga and Thea and Frostbitten Gemma and what's going to happen to them and what's going to happen to them in the seasons to come. So I've got some information on that as well. I'm going to turn it over to Tib for just a few questions that came from our forum. And then we're going to go to Tenkiei and he's going to go over some build information.
All right, guys. Yeah, I looked at the responses for the forum that we got. Now, most of those questions, almost all those questions we got, we'll save for the open mic at the end because they're more rather quick questions. There was one, though, in regards to the story. I wanted to add we are planning on finishing Acts 4 and 5. We just do not have a specific timetable as of yet for when that'll happen, but it's in the works. And just if you have any more questions, just please put them in the Crow's Corner chat. I'll make note of them when we get to the open mic. If we don't get around to answering that question, just ask again, and we'll get to it. All right, Tenkiei, you can take over from here.
All right, first off, thanks for having me. I'm 10. I make a little bit of content here and there on YouTube. You may have seen one of my videos before. If not, that's totally fine. If you're curious about any sort of mechanics, usually I try to make a video to answer the question you might have, hopefully before you have it. I'll usually take going after if I get asked something, 2, 3, or 500 times. The thing about builds, and why, if before you've tried to follow a guide and copy everything exactly, then you feel stuck, or why you found a skill that looked really cool and an item that you felt like would be awesome for it, and somewhere halfway between those two things, everything fell apart, is because builds are greater than the sum of their parts. You can have increases and reductions, flat damage, multipliers, and all these things sound like confusing math terms that were better left in your high school algebra class. However, if you look one layer deeper, if you look at the way the developers built the game and the way the developers designed the skill, you can often find things that will give you insight on how it will work. The best way to do this, if you've never played a skill before or you know nothing about it, is to start with the tags. Words like horizontal or projectile, fire or cold, maybe physical or channeling. Look out for these things and look for where they're repeated elsewhere in the game. Because that's the thing. You have to look for patterns and you have to look for synergies, things that work well together. An example of this that I found during the closed beta test 3 is, and I forget the exact way this started, so forgive me if things are a little bit vague. I think I was playing Whirlwind just because it's spin to win. Why wouldn't I play that? And then I got a two-handed weapon that said something like sacrifice life or lose life. And I thought, well, that's really bad. Why would I want to lose life? That doesn't seem like a good idea. I'm not going to survive that. So I looked into it a little bit more. And I found there's an item called the Tide of Sticks, which says that you gain flat damage added to your attacks per 800 life lost recently being defined as within the last 4 seconds. So now all of a sudden, it's a Berserker archetype. I hurt myself to hit you harder. And then I went looking for other similar wording. What sort of things in Torchlight Infinite also say damage per life lost? There's a couple. There's a legendary chess piece, and there's a weapon mod. Starting with a weapon mod, it's fairly easy to get, though a higher tier roll can be a little bit tricky to roll. And as you go through, you'll find synergies for life loss and synergies for low life. In fact, there's a tree called Blood Striker, and that entire tree is all about losing life to attack faster, being on low life to do more damage. When you look at things from a point of synergy, what works with what and why it works, what did the developer intend for this item, you'll often come to a greater understanding of how to make your build and how to scale it. Too often, I find that people get a little bit stuck looking not at the synergies, but at what they hope works. And I totally get that because I've fallen into that trap myself. I hope this idea is good because there's a help that, let's just say, I'm going to pick a theoretical rather than an existing item, but let's just say it causes your spells to fire in a nova. That sounds really cool. And then you also want to combine that with a helmet that converts a bunch of your spell damage to attack damage because you're hoping the modifier will apply in the nova. And you've gotten so invested in this nova idea that you forgot your character isn't a two-headed ogre, and you can't actually wear 2 helmets. This is a mistake that I found myself making in the past in another game called Path of Exile, when I tried to combine Indigon with Crown of Eyes. Of course, because my character still didn't have 2 heads, the fundamental issue was the same. And so I look for items like the Tide of Sticks and the Crimson King. Crimson King being the chess piece I mentioned earlier. It adds physical damage per life lost recently, and gives me damage reductions and recovery bonuses and damage bonuses for % of life that's missing. When I went to make my Wilt Yoga build, which I believe is still one of my more popular videos on YouTube, at least in relation to Torchlight Infinite, it started because I got an Imploration Dagger and I said, this item isn't very good. I'll just corrode it, and if it hits anything interesting, cool. If it doesn't, I'll vendor it. And it hit wilted enemies explode when killed. Well, that's pretty cool. Explosions seem good for clear. I'd used an explodey weapon before. I'd used an explodey chest before. This seemed like a much, much more economical solution. But I needed a wilt build. So I put together a wilt by Thea. And it sort of worked. But a lot of Thea's wording says double damage and quadruple damage, which isn't exactly ideal for something like wilt that's damage over time. So I then looked, well, what's good for damage over time? And quickly found Yoga Space-Time Elapse. From there, I threw on a second Imploration Dagger. I mean, if one's good, two's better. Two's certainly better than nothing. Ultimately, it wasn't the way that I went. And I just started clearing the story, re-leveling my character. Once I got to endgame, I found the sword Repeated End, which was pretty much a juiced-up version of Imploration Dagger. And at this point, I had the not very broad idea, but understandable, of adding Reap Purification, because I thought, oh, well, if my dots deal damage over time, I'll just reap them and make them deal lots of damage immediately, completely forgetting the fact that Wilt is a short duration dot that relies on you stacking it, and Reap Purification removes all your damage over time effects. I wasn't looking at synergies. I got caught up in the fantasy of, I'm going to put dots on something and hit it very hard. My damage was terrible. I had a 15 or 20 minute boss fight. And that forced me to reassess, to look at things after taking a step back. All right, if Wilt is good, how do I make it work the way the developer intended? How do I stack it? From there, I found that I could apply skill damage to Wilt via a rare dagger. And so I did that. I went from doing around 1 mil DPS to around 6 mil by removing Reap Purification. I went from 6 mil to about 10 mil by switching to the rare dagger. I still had my repeated end, and I still used it to cause enemies to explode. But now I had actual single target, and I continued farming. When I continued farming, I looked into, well, how can I reap? I found Manella's Mist, and I also found my chess piece. Chess piece, which starts your recharge when you reap, Twilight Vestments. From there, I found the King's Boon, which also had a reap on it, and I realized, hey, if 2 reaps are good, 3 reaps are probably better. So I stacked them together. I didn't fully understand reap at this point, but I had enough of an idea to go off that, okay, I want my dots to stack, and I want multiple reaps. And then I looked to see, what about that skill damage? Where could I get more of my skill damage applied to my wilt damage? And that's when I found the legendary item, Memory. It applies a very significant portion of your skill damage to your wilt damage. By equipping 2 memories, my DPS went from the mere 10 mil it was before to over 100 mil, an amount that could no longer be measured on the dummy. All because I said, all right, I want wilt to stack. I need a way for it to do damage, so I need to inherit base damage from somewhere. How do I do that? Memory was the ideal vehicle for that, and the ideal applicator, in my case, was Shadow Shot and Shadow Swamp. Shadow Swamp has pretty good base stats, and it's cast automatically when you cast Shadow Shot. So you can put utility supports like Cataclysm and Reaping Agony on your Shadow Shot, and functionally, they're supporting your Shadow Swamp without having to be directly linked to the skill. And this is the big advantage of 2-button builds, both in something like Torchlight Infinite, and also many other ARPGs on the market. Yes, it's a little bit clunkier, but as a result, you get additional power because you can put utility effects in to make your main skill that much stronger. And at this point, my build felt great. I was able to clear all the content, and I only got there because I didn't just look at, all right, I want to be a build or I want to be an erosion build. I looked at how did the developers design Wilt to work? Well, they wanted it to be stacked. And how did they design it to be scaled? I leaned into the developer's design and I tried to put my own take on it, whether or not it's actually truly my own or someone else was just in silence doing it before me. I have no idea. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter how many other people play my build. It's still fun for me. And no amount of people playing it or not playing it can ever change that. So next time you're trying to make a build, don't just look at a cool skill or an interesting item. Try to take a step back and think, how did the developers intend for this to be used? Maybe search on TLIDB or somewhere else. What do the words actually say? And are there other items with similar wording? Because things are all in the game by design. Sure, there's going to be some unintended consequences, some unintended interactions that the devs don't think about. But for the most part, the devs are giving you a sandbox and you get to assemble the sandcastle. Doesn't mean that you have to do it without any of their help. You can always use that bucket-shaped tower or tower-shaped bucket.
Which came first, the chicken or the egg, right?
Yep, and in many cases, both at once.
Well, thank you, Tenkiei, for your definite diatribe on exactly how builds and synergies work together. That was definitely informative and I appreciated it, especially as a person that doesn't necessarily understand exactly all the mechanics and all the math and all the exact details of how everything works together. You can kind of follow along the ideas of what the devs made and kind of follow along the ideas of a build rather than just follow along, hey, this math works with that math. So that was really appreciated by me.
Yeah, and that's always my goal when I talk about builds. Because if I were to give you exactly do this thing in this way, and you will have these results, then I'm now the local fish vendor. Every time you want to build, you have to come to me. If
Not only
instead,
that, but if you take one misstep along that path, then it all falls apart. It all falls apart, and you're left with a bunch of crumbs in your hands, and you're wondering why this doesn't work together. And it's just because you took one tiny misstep, and that's it.
and that even happened with my wilt build at first. A couple people were wondering why they weren't doing any wilt damage. And it's because they never added base damage. I don't know if they had actually been following what I'd been doing early on, or if they had just tried wilt on their own. I just know when I first started talking about it as an idea, several people came to me saying, I'm trying to play wilt, and I'm not doing any damage, and I'm not seeing wilt appear on enemies. Why is that? Well, it's because you have to give it base damage. It has a base damage of 0, and it then inherits that damage from, I don't believe there's any talents that do it, but I know there's erosion damage support, and of course, many items.
Yes. All right. Well, moving on to the FAQ section of today. Thank you again for speaking with us today. Appreciate that. And moving on to the FAQ section of today, we have some exciting news about the characters. And then also, you guys are going to be able to opt out of notifications. So we're going to have basically roles that will be assigned for those that know about Discord well. It'll be roles that are assigned automatically to everyone that has a language role. And you'll be opted into Discord news, game news, and Crow's Corner news. And you'll have a channel in which you can click a button and opt out of any of those newses. So you can opt out of getting Crow's Corner news or getting game news or getting Discord news and just opt out of those at all. We're also going to have an option to opt in for content creator notifications. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but a lot of content creators have been showing up here lately. We're migrating them from an outside server to an inside server, to everyone's server. And with that, they're going to be able to post in the streaming channel that they're streaming at the moment. And that will give a notification. And if you'd like to go ahead and opt into that, that will be another button in the same post that you can opt into to say, hey, I'd like to follow my favorite streamer. Another issue that's going on is the weekly challenges, as far as some weekly challenges not being available to you when you have leveled up to 80 already, and then you get the new week appearing and you can't get that reward, and without it being retroactive. That is something that's being worked on, but unfortunately, it looks like it's not going to be fixed until next season. So we do have to just kind of bear with it for this season and see how it goes. Game chat is another one that's being looked at, and I know there's no way to block or report people in game right now, but that's a very high priority to the devs to have that coded into the game where you can actually successfully block people, get them out of your chat, get the name filter working, and also be able to report right from chat. The dot translation issues that are happening right now between the God of Darkness tree, those will be fixed in tomorrow's patch. And those will be, so that's in tomorrow's patch, will be fixed. That's good to go. As far as the heroes being purchased, Gemma will be available for hero tokens next season. So even though she's available for Primo Chris right now, she will be available for tokens next season, so save your tokens. Yoga will still be available with hero emblems next season with the hero emblems tokens next season as well. Thea will be moving to Primo Christs next season and then moving to emblems after that. So Thea is not going away either. And so there is all of your information about heroes and how they're coming out in the future. As far as the Discord link from the menu, we all know that you all are on Discord, but as far as your friends and family members go, that's being worked on as far as the game menu, clicking on that and coming to Discord. Now, does anybody have any questions for the open mic session? Does anybody want to come on mic or?
Hey Rob, I know I got a couple questions that people asked in the chat.
Sure.
That we got one person asked, is there any plans to have like pretty much preset talents like saved to like a page, like a loadout essentially? They're asking if there's any plan of that right
As
now.
far as I know, there's no plan of that. I know it's a highly requested feature and I will continue to relay that to the devs, but as far as I know, that's not a planned feature.
Okay. Let me check. I got another person asking if they'll ever extend the season pass past 60, because they say once you get to 60, there's no more rewards. I know a lot of games, me personally, a lot of games, once you hit those final tier of rewards, maybe it's just a repeating reward afterwards, maybe Oblivion.
Something small, yeah, some small tokens or, yeah, I get you. That's something I will note down for my next meeting with the devs.
Copy that. And then, I'm not sure how to say your name. Chill? I'm not sure if you want to hop on mic. I saved your question, but it'd probably be a little easier if you talked about it. If you want to hop on mic, I'll paste the question back into here and see if you're fine, because I'm sure you can ask a little better over on mic.
That sounds like a question for extra.
Yeah, I just pasted it again into the crow's corner.
So, I can answer that question real quick. So melee, okay, so melee skills and spell skills, that when you level them up, you get different benefits mostly. Spell skills, you get more flat damage, and you also get more damage effectiveness. But attacks, generally, there's a couple exceptions. The only benefit to leveling them up is just getting a small boost to the damage effectiveness multiplier stat. So there might be instances where mathematically it is a better idea to opt for an extra damage multiplier over melee skill level, because melee skill levels, they're impactful. They're just maybe not that impactful, you know. But spell skill levels, they tend to be extremely impactful.
Okay. And then,
Does that answer your question, Chill? Q?
no, the Q is me prefacing it, saying this is the question.
Oh, okay.
This is the name.
I actually have something to add there. Damage to health is a post damage reduction modifier, and there are several enemies in the game with damage reduction, specifically in the higher levels of Path of Brave and the higher level Uber Keegan, which that does make a difference in, as those are outside of their damage calculations.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
All right. And then for you, Rob,
Yeah, Luna.
Chill's typing, so he might have something more to add.
Oh, so regarding defense mechanics, I'm assuming the question is like, how is armor and evasion calculated? The short answer is we don't know. We're going to go ask the devs that. we don't have that answer for you yet, and a lot of people.
Yeah, we don't have that answer for you yet, and as soon as we do, and as soon as we have some actual numbers and mechanics on that, you will be the first to know.
And then the second question by the same person, Rob, I assume this is more a question for you, is they're asking on if there's any season 1 exclusive items, so that if there is exclusive one, they don't want to accidentally salvage them if they're not going to become available later on. They're asking if there's any.
The only thing that I
think we have a
know,
list.
the only thing that I know for sure is that the pets are not disappearing and the mechanic is not disappearing. I don't know about any items, but the only thing that I can think of is a corroded item.
No, so there is. I think there's like I think some official source saying somewhere that a couple dozen items currently in the game are apparently exclusive to the league. We don't know what those are. No one knows what those are. We could probably make note of that because
I am pretty sure that those are the ones that are exclusively from Uber Keegan.
That's my assumption, but we might be wrong.
Well, that's the only thing that would be specific to this league that is not accounted for like
Okay, well let me ask, and if they are exactly where they come from, Eon, that's a good question. Exactly where they come from and what a list of them is, so that we can have a list of them and know exactly what it is that you guys are trying to save.
Okay, so Satos, for your question on pets and POB, no, that doesn't work, because if that worked, Chalk Spirit would produce 500 Flame Elementium every single time you did Path of Brave. Funny as that is, that's not how that works. So, yeah, pet loot bonuses are not enabled in Path of Brave.
Okay, let's see here. Hey, Rob, another question for you, Rob. We have Young pointed out that there's been 3 new classes in season 1. They want to know if that's a trend moving forward.
They hope to release at least one hero trait or one hero per season. So that would be the norm. There happens to be 3 in the first season because there was a bunch of time leading up to season 1, right? And there was CBT1 and then CBT2 and then CBT3. And so there was a bunch of time leading up to this one. I don't think it's going to be the norm to release 3 basically new heroes, because even a sub-hero is essentially a new hero. I don't think that's going to be the norm, but I think that you can expect for at least 1 to be coming out.
1, occasionally 2 would be
Yeah.
like the way to see it. Is 1 is guaranteed, 2 is lucky.
Well, and 1's not guaranteed. One is
Well, yeah.
One is what they hope for. One is what they're gonna work really hard for.
Yeah, that would be a better way to put it. Is 1 is the
expected.
2 is if you're lucky, and 3 is unlikely.
Oh, isn't that the question, Mike? Isn't that the question, Mike? Who is the cat lady in all the promo videos? Redacted.
Dot damage works for anything that says dot damage percent that isn't currently bugged, because there's a lot of bugs regarding the text on that. Dot damage percent, it will apply to Ignite, Bleed, Wilt, and skills that do persistent damage, which is like Black Hole, Shadow Swamp, Frost Pool, Flame Path, stuff like that.
And to answer Mike one up, we don't know either who the cat lady is, but I'm sure we would all like to know.
I'm sure we'll be informed eventually, with the not everyone paying from the devs.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we do, I'm sure it's going to be a big news blow up. That's going to be kapow.
I can honestly just bet on it being the season pass.
Well, that can be an assumption, but we don't want to really confirm.
Yeah, that's my guess. That is my personal guess.
Yeah, that would be honestly my personal guess as well. That would be my personal guess, but No, that's actually not the cat lady. That's a different one.
That's a different thing.
That's a different character, Luna.
Don't know what that character is. I don't even think that character's been in any, actually dated promotional material.
But
Don't know
yeah,
what
there's two floating characters out there. One of them would be each.
Okay. So physique is just you are larger. You are literally larger. I don't know if that applies to your hitbox, but congratulations, you are now larger. You gained like 40 pounds. Sorry.
I don't think it's Esmeralda, but I do think it's part of her people.
Yeah, I don't think it's Esmeralda.
At any rate, I think we're good to move on and go ahead and close the Crow's Corner for today and just move on to the open mic questions. We can all hang around and chill for a little while. But I think that we've covered most of the information for this evening, and I appreciate everybody coming. Definitely thank you to Tenkiei for coming and giving us some perspective on builds and how you can kind of work in what you need to make something work instead of working against it and working, you know, at least in my perspective, working against the system instead of working with it.